What up, Cucks? It's your boy, the Hater, up in this. And one other thing that happened on SmackDown that I thought was actually pretty great, excuse the hater, was Braun Breaker, right? Braun Breaker comes into the ring. Already in the ring is Paulie D from Jersey Shore, also known as Zion Quinn, who I actually thought this guy had something going for him when he started in NXT 2.0, but obviously nothing came of it. He's on his way out, let's be real, right? So the match was great. This is why the match was great. Because it doesn't have to be a technical masterpiece. The bell rings, Braun Breaker runs across the ring, spears the guy, pins him 1, 2, 3. That's it, right? Plain, simple, not enough time wasted, right? And it gets the point across. And the point is that Braun Breaker is the type of dude that will run, spear you, pin you, and leave, right? He's not getting paid by the hour. He's getting paid by the minute, right? He's there to go beat people up and establish his dominance. So the question then becomes, what do we do with this next? Like, okay, fine. For another 6-7 weeks, if you really want to, you can just push this forward, right? You can just have Braun Breaker do this, beat people really easily, kind of give him the Baron Corbin treatment, right? Fine. That's going to be fine for a few weeks. But then there's going to come a point where he's going to have to wrestle people that are not Zion Quinn. He's going to have to wrestle people that cannot take an L, or people that can take an L, but they cannot take a squash. Then what happens, right? This is the problem with Baron Corbin. I thought that the original Baron Corbin was a very cool character because he was beating people with a badass finisher in like 3 seconds, right? It was great. He would just go there, clothesline, end of days, 1, 2, 3, walk out of the ring, right? Perfect. Then he wrestled like Bull Dempsey and Rhino, and he's having competitive matches. He's winning them, but he's having competitive matches, and it's like, oh, all the allure is gone. And then he starts losing. That's the next step. So how would I book Braun Breaker? And hear me out, Cucks, because this is going to solve two problems that WWE has. Number one, what to do with Braun Breaker after 6 or 7 weeks. And number two, what to do with Walter or Gunther for the rest of his miserable career that is going to be boring probably. But I have a solution for both, Cucks. Here's what should happen. After 7 weeks of doing this, 8 weeks of doing this, maybe at WrestleMania, I don't know, I don't care, right? The point is, Gunther versus Braun Breaker. That's the match to make. They were going to do Gunther versus Brock Lesnar. Gunther versus Braun Breaker makes a lot more sense now that Brock Lesnar has been shamed, I guess. I don't know, right? I don't know what the deal with that is. So here's how the match goes. Gunther has an elaborate entrance after Braun Breaker makes his entrance. The bell rings. You can even have a little distraction where Gunther is like folding his title in the corner or something. He turns around, gets speared 1, 2, 3 in 3 seconds. Boom. Now everyone's thinking, oh my God, they just buried Gunther after having like a 2-year Intercontinental title reign. Au contraire, cuckold. Au contraire. Then what happens is Braun Breaker, Gunther's out of TV for like 5 months, right? Braun Breaker starts winning. Braun Breaker becomes champion. Now, I know you're thinking, it's too soon. No, it isn't. Because the other champion is Seth Rollins or Damian Priest. And Braun Breaker has a much higher ceiling than both. So in my opinion, Braun Breaker should just beat them too, right? He can have a competitive match with them. It doesn't matter. Then after this, right, while he's champion, Gunther comes back to an enormous pop, right? And now Gunther has 2 reasons to be in the main event. Reason number 1, he already dominated the mid-card, right? He shouldn't have, but he did. And reason number 2, the one guy to beat him in like 2 years is Braun Breaker, right? So he comes in there, and he's like, all right, I'm back, cuck. Now what? And then they have a match. And this match is competitive. And then Gunther, he can even win the title at that point. It doesn't matter because the pop will be insane, right? The idea that Gunther's coming back as essentially a face, right? Because I would turn Braun Breaker heel as soon as possible, but he comes back as a face just because, like, oh, he got squashed, and like you don't want to, like, nobody wants to see that, right? Except for me, I guess, right? But he comes back and he's like, all right, I lost 1 match, but like, let's not forget that I'm still the guy that was champion for like 2 years, right? So he has a match with Braun Breaker, and even if he loses or wins, doesn't matter. They have a competitive match, and boom, just like that, you have 2 main eventers, right? And then you can put them in different shows. I don't give a shit what happens afterwards. But the point is, that's how you get Gunther over this slump. Now you're thinking to yourselves, wait a second, why does Gunther have to get squashed? Because a squash allows him to take some time off because he's been working hard, right? And, it's that embarrassing thing, right? Like just when John Cena loses a match, he doesn't show up for like another 2 months, right? That became a thing, right? Where it's like he just loses and he won't show up because just that's what Cena does. Just like Roman Reigns, like for a fact, we all know that when Roman Reigns, if it's at Mania or not, when Roman Reigns loses the title, he's going to be gone maybe forever, but at least for like 4 or 5 months. And he's going to have like a massive comeback if he comes back, maybe at Rumble and wins it or something, right? But he's going to be gone for a while. He's going to recuperate. You know what I'm saying? Now, with all that being said, what is the alternative for either man, right? Well, I've already explained the alternative for Braun Breaker. The alternative for Braun Breaker is quite simple. He shows up, right? Squashes people for 7 months, or 7 weeks, I should say, right? And then he starts having competitive matches. He can be undefeated for 10 years, who cares? But he's going to have competitive matches and the allure will go away, right? Braun Breaker, even though I think he's talented because he's a good wrestler and he has like presence, right? At the end of the day, he's not like The Miz. He's not this like super charismatic guy, right? He could easily have a Tommaso Ciampa career. Let's not get it twisted, right? This is not like a sure thing, but he should be a sure thing because he's young and talented, right? Paul Heyman guy, whatever you want to do, right? Maybe after Roman Reigns loses, Paul Heyman hitches his trailer to Braun Breaker. Braun Breaker becomes champion, maybe on Raw or whatever. Who cares, right? The point is, because I think Cody Rhodes, even if he becomes champion, he's going to go back to Raw. And somehow they're going to have a draft and Rollins is going to happen on SmackDown, right? Like, or Damian Priest or Judgment Day, whatever. Like, the titles are going to switch brands, right? The World Heavyweight title is going to go back to where it belongs, SmackDown, the B show. And SmackDown will be the B show again once Cody Rhodes, if he becomes champion, which I'm sure at this point he will be, right? So what happens is you have Braun Breaker win the irrelevant title, right? And then he can have a nice lengthy reign. The point I'm trying to make is quite simple, Cucks. It's quite simple. If this doesn't happen, then there is a very high probability that Braun Breaker will be lost in the shuffle. You know, he could have like a Batista career, or he could also have a Bronson Reed or Keith Lee career. That's also in the cards, right? Now, what about the other side of the coin? Gunther. When Gunther loses the title, which is going to happen eventually, right? Because he's not really doing anything, right? He's going to stay complacent and stagnant until he loses the title. Then he's going to lose it to some jabron, right? At least if he loses to Braun Breaker, it's a big deal. But if he loses it to, like, I don't know, Chad Gable or something, right? It's going to be a good moment for Chad Gable, but it's not going to go down as this, like, legendary moment in the history of the Intercontinental title. It's going to be like when Zack Ryder won the ladder match at WrestleMania. People are like, this is a moment for the Intercontinental title. No, it's not. Like, nobody cared, right? Nobody cared at all that they gave it to Zack Ryder for, like, 2 weeks, right? Nobody cared. It was just like he's a transitional champion. So with that being said, right, if Gunther loses the title, then what's next? Then he's going to try his hand at the main event. Who's he going to wrestle? Who is he going to wrestle? Randy Orton? Fine, let's say he beats Randy Orton in a competitive match, right? Eventually, he's going to have to go against Cucky Rhodes, and he's not beating Cucky Rhodes. And with that being said, what is left for him to do? Go back to the mid-card, try to get the IC title back? That's going to look really bad for someone that after he loses the title this time, Gunther should have no business ever going for the IC title, right? You haven't had enough of being IC champion. You want to just replicate your reign. Maybe when he's like at the end of his career, in like 10, 15 years, he can do that. But now he needs to move on to the next step. But the problem is he's not good enough to move on to the next step. And there's nothing compelling for him to do at the next step. So the correct thing to do is to pair him to tie his destiny with Braun Breaker and move them both simultaneously, right? It's as simple as that. If you really want, you can even do it the other way, right? You can have Braun Breaker lose the title lose his match to Gunther, and Braun Breaker goes away. But that doesn't make much sense because Braun Breaker just got here. So, I think my answer is the correct answer. And this is a classic way to push someone, and it's a classic way to push two people. But instead of doing this, they probably won't, obviously. They're going to do some other BS. But if they do it, let it be on the record that I said it first. Cucks, you know what I'm saying? Otherwise, next year is going to be worse than this year. And this year was bad, right? There was nothing this year that was worth watching. All the pay-per-views were mid or below mid, and all the gimmicky things were garbage. Nobody cared about Survivor Series, even though we had like 5 people come back. I guess next year we still have CM Punk to worry about, but that's another thing for another time. I mean, he even makes it that far, honestly. Like, I could see them releasing his ass. Because how long do you think his contract is? Like, you think it's like a 5-year contract? I doubt it. It's probably like a 1 or 2-year contract. So they might just put him on the shelf and be like, all right, this didn't work out. Here's your money. Beat it. As usual, you provide nothing for us. That being said, Cucks, I mean, I don't know what else I can say to make this point better than it already is because it's a perfect point. Both people benefit from this. Sometimes, I hate to sound cliche, but sometimes you got to take a step back to move forward. Such is the case with Drew McIntyre. Drew McIntyre and Sheamus lost in a competitive slap fight match that got 5 stars against Gunther. But I mean, Sheamus is gone now. Like he's injured or whatever the fuck he is, right? But Drew McIntyre has, despite that loss, has come out on top. He's come out above Gunther, right? He did better than Gunther in everything that matters. So that being said, it's like, what do we do next, right? Will we give Drew McIntyre his WrestleMania moment? Maybe we do, maybe we don't. I don't care. But Gunther gets no moments. Gunther doesn't even know he's wrestling. It could be like it could legit be Chad Gable. I mean, who the hell knows? Probably not, but like we'll see. The point is, this is a way to push both people and preserve Gunther and also make this title run worthwhile. Otherwise, this title run is going to be meaningless. The title run that Gunther had is only meaningful if it ends in a way that is meaningful, right? It didn't begin in a way that's meaningful, but it must end in a way that's meaningful. Otherwise, it's just a title reign, right? It's just like when Shelton Benjamin was champion for like 7 months, Intercontinental champion for 7 months, and nobody cares. Nobody cared who the champion was before. And then Orton was a champion afterwards, but nobody cared, right? It was like RVD and Orton somewhere in there. There was a sandwich, right? But the idea is nobody cared. Nobody cared about any of that shit. The truth is that the person that wins the IC title from Gunther needs to be made. And that's why it cannot be wasted on a jobber, right? And it should be given to someone like Braun Breaker he actually needs the belt because he's new, right? And his gimmick appears to be that he's going to squash a lot of people. So in order to preserve the logic behind this, he needs to also squash Gunther, and that's what I got to say about that. Cucks.